What's going on, everyone? Jared Sandler here with you, and I am really excited to share episode 33 of the Just a Sec conversation. And this episode is with San Diego Padres manager Jayce Tingler. And we'll get to Jayce in a second. First of all, just want to say thank you for clicking on the link and getting this far. Really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to this channel. I try to put out all sorts of different content, interviews, both serious and funny and a little bit of both, and commentaries and roundtables, and would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to this channel and sharing it with your friends. It's free. It's easy. It doesn't take much time. You just click a button, and it's not going to spam the crap out of you. I promise you that. All right. Anyway, Jayce Tingler is a friend of mine and someone I've gotten to know over the past few years during his time with the Rangers organization. Jayce is not incredibly big in stature, but when I first was around Jayce, he was always like focused and serious and had, the Oakley baseball sunglasses on, and I was kind of intimidated by him. But I kept hearing, you got to meet Jayce, you got to talk to Jayce, and I finally, I'm 25 years old or whatever, but I was a little like timid, and I talked to Jayce, and within seconds he's smiling, and you realize what a good person he is. His journey, his story is so interesting, coming more or less from a farm, an exceptional two-sport athlete in high school, a candidate for McDonald's All-American on the basketball side, and, goes to college for baseball and plays professionally for a little bit, and then his journey into coaching. I mean, he climbed the ladder. He hit every rung, including some time in the front office, and now is getting his first crack at managing a Major League Baseball team. We talk about his childhood, the journey, what he's learned, some of his coaching philosophies, and I'm really excited for Jayce to be a Major League manager. And Rangers fans, if you're looking for a National League team to support, you may as well support the Padres with A.J. Preller as the GM and Jayce Tingler as the manager. Anyway, here we go. Episode 33 of the Just a Sec conversation is with my friend, Jayce Tingler. All right, Jayce, so the first thing that I like to ask people, and it's open-ended, take it in whatever direction you'd like, but when you think back to your childhood, your experiences, interests, influences, hobbies, whatever, there's not a specific way you need to answer this, but when you think back to your childhood, what are the things that stand out to you?
Good times, first of all, coming from, both my parents were together. They were teachers. They were coaches at the high school level. So since they were teachers, they got the summers off, and we did a lot of baseball playing. In the winter, we did basketball, and we were a pretty active family. So it was just a lot of good times. When I think back, I think about all the teammates and friends that I've made, and through those days, and traveling around the United States, going to different tournaments and doing that with my family. So it was a very positive experience. Okay,
so you come from an athletic family, right? Like both your parents, involved in sports in a number of ways. So I guess, I always like to know what led people to sports. So I guess for you, I imagine that's just sort of a part of the Tingler family.
Yeah, I think that's safe. When I started to get, like in my teens and things like that, I think like my parents set me down and said, you can do, two things. You can get a job, and start working, or if you want to, work at, basketball, baseball, like we'll support you, in that way. And so I'd had, a couple jobs, mainly referee and umpire and stuff like that. I was like, I think I'd rather just play. And then, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship at the University of Missouri and stayed there 4 years and ended up getting drafted and going into pro ball. So I was very fortunate.
Both your parents were coaches, right?
Yeah. Basketball, my mom, 31 years, high school basketball coach. And then my dad, basketball, softball, and then they both did track as well.
And from an athletic standpoint, was your mom a really good basketball player, or athletically, what were their like what's their resume, I guess?
They both played college basketball, and my mom played college basketball and softball.
Okay.
And so, being honest, just obviously I didn't see them play, but going back and looking at their accomplishments, their resumes or whatever, my mom was a better athlete.
Would your dad admit that?
100% he would.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
So I grew up not with the same athletic ability or resume that you did, but I grew up the son of a coach. My dad was a coach, and I know there are certain things that I understood because, just through his experiences that maybe benefited me, whether it's, just how to talk to coaches and handle issues or just whatever. I'm curious, what were some of the takeaways that maybe benefited you being the son of not just one, but two coaches as you were trying to make your way athletically?
Oh, I think a lot of things. I think, the way that they worked, I definitely took away work ethic, the way they prepared and were organized, and then probably more importantly, the way they interacted, dealt with their athletes, the parents, things like that. And so the way they communicated. I think like those would be some of the takeaways. And then certainly just being around all the time, having access to a gym while a practice is going on, things like that.
And then, I know that, the time periods are way different and the levels at which they're coaching and you're now coaching and managing are different. But is there anything that if you were to really break down your habits or style as a coach beyond just general work ethic, where you could say, yeah, like that reminds me of your mom or that reminds me of your dad?
Yeah, I would say both. I'd say, they both worked incredibly hard, but I remember being like at a young age, getting up, to go to the bathroom late at night. Maybe it was 1 a.m., 2 a.m. or whatever. And mom would be, back then it was VCRs. And maybe the game that they played that night, she would be hitting the pause button, writing down notes, hitting play, studying film, things like that. So I definitely took away, the way to prepare, the work ethic, and those type of things. But I clearly remember that like at a young age, and that's just the way it was around the house, especially during basketball season.
Did you say VCR?
VCR, yes.
Sorry, what are those again?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, did you grow up on a farm, Jayce, or is that just? I know now your home in Missouri is you're living the farm life, but did you grow up on a farm?
No, I grew up on 3 acres. Both my grandparents were farmers. And so, going up to grandma and grandpa's, which was, 45-minute drive or an hour away, that was the farmland. And obviously that's where my parents grew up.
Okay. So, I think when I think of work ethic, not that everyone who grows up on a farm or has those sorts of responsibilities, I guess not everyone has a great work ethic, but it just seems like that's not the type of lifestyle you go through if you don't know how to bust your tail. And so I'm just curious, like from that standpoint, not the athletic side, but the farming side and grandparents and stuff, what were some of your memories on the farm and, chores and things that you did and just takeaways from those experiences?
Yeah. Definitely again, the work ethic, grandpa getting up early, and grandma and grandpa were always at the games that they could be. He couldn't travel, when we would go play tournaments and things like that in the summer because, he had to feed the hogs, the cattle, soybeans, corn, all that. So, just seeing him, being around him, just every day, get up and do his job. And it was, from when the sun came up to the sun came down. And, those are some of the good memories I have. Obviously, going up, being young, driving the tractor for the first time, things like that.
Were there any chores that like, hey, if you're going to go see grandma and grandpa, you got to do this? And like, maybe you didn't necessarily love those particular chores, or did you not ever really have to do any of that?
No, it was never mandatory. It was more, fun. It was, going with grandpa and riding on the tractor and feeding the hogs and doing things like that. And, when you're young, it's just such a, fun time jumping on the hay bales and things like that. So it was all fun.
All right, so back to your athletic career growing up. You were a really good basketball player. Obviously, baseball was a path that you ended up pursuing, but on the basketball side, McDonald's All-American nominee. Was it tough for you to pursue baseball? What do you remember about that decision to go the baseball route ultimately and not the basketball route?
I ended up getting more bigger offers in baseball, around my junior year. I was getting some smaller offers, some smaller Division I schools started to look at me in basketball. But at that time, when we were 15, 16, I started to get noticed in baseball. And, we ended up picking up, we had a really good summer team. And that's where, at least back then, that's when all the recruiting was really done. And for me, being from a small school, I played on a travel team in the city, and we had some really good players. And then we were 15, maybe 16. We had the shortstop move in, and all of a sudden, all these scouts are coming to watch him. And I was more of a product of watching him. And then our catcher was a big time player as well. He ended up going to Texas A&M. The shortstop was Albert Pujols. And so all these scouts are coming in to watch Albert. And, meanwhile, I was hitting either leadoff or second. And, because they're watching Albert, maybe a scout only got one game of watching me. Well, they kept coming and watching Albert and some of these other guys. So I think I was just a product of just getting seen a lot, because of some of the big names around.
What do you remember about Albert Pujols back then?
A lot of the traits that he has today: unbelievable work ethic, super competitive, and then obviously, he was a shortstop then. He was a phenomenal athlete. Then we would play basketball, and I think a lot of people missed how good of an athlete he was. Obviously, now he's older and having, knee and foot issues. He doesn't move the same way. He was an unbelievable point guard when we'd go play basketball. Great body control, good passer, very good defender, could get to the rim. He could do a lot of things.
Wow. That's not something I've really ever heard about him.
Yeah. And I think back then, the scouts were, probably watching more on the baseball field. And, they probably didn't watch him play a lot of high school basketball, which is probably why, if you dug in a little bit deeper and saw what type of athlete he was and how he can move on the basketball court, the body control, the feel, he probably would have been a little bit better pick than I believe it was the 13th round back then.
So just curious, I remember the player who I grew up either playing with or against, who is, now a star in baseball, is Clayton Kershaw. He was a year older than me, and we used to take hitting lessons next to one another at Highland Park. Not that I lived there, but that's where he lived and went to school. And then, every once in a while I'd have to stand in the box because after his hitting lesson with a guy named Ricky Joe, he'd want to throw a little bit. And I remember this Clayton Kershaw guy, he's supposed to be really good, and then he wins, high school player of the year or whatever. But I didn't, beyond just that, it wasn't I was oh my gosh, this guy is going to be an absolute stud. Did you, when you were with Albert then, were you wow, this guy, maybe not one of the best right-handed hitters of all time, because that's,
right,
that's tough to know, but were you this guy's a major leaguer, and he's not, he can be a good major leaguer?
We knew he was, different. He could just do things. And, of course, we were using metal bats then. He had an air attack. And I remember him being, out on his front foot and still hitting a line drive off the wall and then, playing shortstop and playing defense and doing all that. I remember, how good he was. And then I was a little bit, you don't know when you're 16, 17, 18. You just don't know. He's really good. I remember being dang, if this guy's only a 13th rounder, and this is the best guy I've ever seen, I was honestly, I don't think I have any chance.
All right, so you go to Missouri. Is there anything about that experience, your time at Missouri, that stands out to you that when you look back, you're man, that was really pivotal because I learned this, or this particular person, in Columbia was so helpful for me? Yeah,
I had a lot of people that, helped. Certainly Coach Jameson, who was the head coach there. And then being around, players like, Ryan Stiegel, Ian Kinsler, guys like that. I think the most important thing I took away, from the college days, though, is just, kind of finding out who I was and like what I can and can't do. First time like living, outside of like my home and you're on your own. So to me, it was just more of a time finding out, what I could do, physically, mentally, all those things. And certainly getting pushed in the weight room and getting pushed on the field. And I was lucky enough, to play like my freshman year. And, I did all right. And I remember that, I remember seeing guys that maybe have good freshman years, good sophomore years, then you kind of watch them either their junior or senior years, and they're the same player. And I think I was always kind of driven to be a little bit better each and every year.
So you get drafted by the Blue Jays organization, 10th round in 2003. At that point, are you thinking, all right, this is the next step in a long major league career? Like, where were you mentally, from a playing standpoint, as far as where you were and what you thought was ahead of you?
Well, I got into pro ball, and I expected to do really well, and I just did okay. And I noticed there were a lot of guys like around, levels above, guys that I was playing with, levels below that were super, super talented. And so I really had a goal. I wanted to get to Double-A. I was always told that, Double-A is kind of the cutoff of if you could play in the big leagues like or not. And, right once I got in, I knew I wanted to get into coaching. I got some advice from some people, and I had some job offers to get into coaching. And, probably the best advice they gave me was play as long as you can, and the coaching's always going to be there. And so I did. I played, 4 years, whatever it was, and then I was lucky enough to get a coaching job right when I was done.
All right, so you get taken by the Rangers in the minor league version of the Rule 5 draft in 2005, and I guess your current boss, A.J. Preller, who was with the Rangers in a front office capacity, was instrumental in that selection, and just with his responsibilities at the time. What do you remember about that process, and maybe like when was the first time you met AJ? What are your initial memories of AJ?
I didn't really meet AJ until I had been thinking about taking a coaching job with the Rangers. So I had previously talked to Scott Service, who was the farm director at the time, and he said, "Hey, we may have a coaching job for you. Hang tight." So I waited a month or so, and then he came back and said, "We've got something for you. It's a little bit different, but would you have interest?" And that was to coach in the Dominican Republic. And at the time, the Rangers had just had an academy new down in the Dominican. It was in San Pedro. And they wanted to know if I'd go down there and if I'd be interested in. So I went down there. I believe the first trip was like 2 weeks. I went to work, and then they sent me home for a week or two, basically so I could reflect on if this is what I want to do. So I went home, immediately I knew that's what I wanted to do. And, AJ was in charge of the international program at the time. So he was, signing, young Latin players, and we were getting them into the program. And, they were playing games, and, we're hopeful to get some of the kids to the States. And that's what I did. That's what I ended up doing for 3 years down there.
So when actually, I need to ask you this. I remember reading, I think it was like Jamie Newberg that wrote this, and I've never actually asked you. Some people, and maybe it was Jamie, that said that whether it was, he had heard or whatever, that the Rangers got you because they saw a future coach in you. Like they acquired you as a player because they wanted to, to have you in their grasp for coaching. Was that ever communicated? Is there truth to that, or is that just kind of a myth, I guess, that's out there about the time, like when the Rangers acquired you?
I'd never heard that. I'd never had any discussion on that. All I know is, when I was told is, when I was drafted over there was, I think they looked at, maybe my strike zone discipline. I was always a guy that really never struck out. I think, in the seasons I would go 75 walks to 25 strikeouts, something like that. So I think that's why they initially drafted me.
Just curious, in this time now where, and I don't recall specifically then, like how walks were valued. Obviously, they were valued by the Rangers, so that was a big reason why. But now it's like, walks are huge, and strikeout to walk numbers. Well, just as a hitter, what enabled you to have such a strong grasp of the strike zone? What were some of the drills or ways you would improve, to have those types of numbers?
Well, in all the teams I ever played on, I had a lot of clarity in what my goal was, and the coaches, they told me to set the table, get on base. And so I think I've been blessed with really good hand-eye coordination. I never really had a problem hitting the ball. My problem was getting enough on the ball once it was hit, especially as you started moving up the levels. And so, I always saw the ball very well. I never had a problem really hitting the ball. I never had a problem, hitting the ball the other way or using all parts of the field. So that part came to me, fairly easy. I didn't really recognize it, probably until, you get out of the game. I just really never struck out. I think, I played 4 years of like high school ball. I think I struck out 2 or 3 times, through that entire career. I didn't strike out a lot in college, and I didn't strike out a lot, in the minor leagues. So I would say more than anything, it's probably just, hand-eye coordination, and I could see the ball really well. My problem was I couldn't do anything after I saw it.
All right, so when you look at your coaching journey and how you got to where you are, it is a very blue-collar approach. You talked about starting as a coach in the Dominican, and you've held, gosh, it seems like just about every role, even some time in the front office, which we'll get to. But and everyone's journey is different. Some guys never spend a day coaching in the minor leagues, and they end up as managers. We've even recently seen, like Aaron Boone go from a broadcaster to being a manager without any minor league coaching. There are all sorts of different journeys. Yours, I think, is very representative of who you are, the hard work and the things that are important to you. And so when you reflect on climbing that ladder and really going rung to rung, what are the things now that you think about and the things that maybe are important or meaningful to you when you reflect on that journey?
Wow, that's a tough question. It's been, it's been 15, 16 years. I'd say like the most valuable thing I clearly remember are the 3 years I spent down in the Dominican Republic. Because we were dealing with 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old Dominicans, Venezuelans. And so I immediately had to brush up on the Spanish. You're trying to do everything in your second language, which looking back, I think that was incredibly valuable. But also there was a big period of like trial and error, down there. You're literally on an island. You have a baseball complex and a lot of players. And so you tried things. You tried things that worked. You tried things that didn't work. You probably learned more from the things that didn't work. Okay, like don't do that. And then, I knew outfield defense, I knew hitting, I knew base running. Then all of a sudden you're in charge of, the entire program and the teams down there. So I didn't know anything about pitching. I didn't know anything about catching, the things that go on in the weight room, the training room, infield defense. And so, being able to pick guys in the organization's brains, being able to talk to rovers, being able to reach out to other coaches. Hey, how do you do this? How do you, how do you get the shortstop use his backhand? What are some drills? And so just having a ton of resources, and then with a lot of trial and error, I think like those 3 years down there were very critical.
All right. So you end up working your way into a role with the big league team, and that's when we first met. What was that first experience like? And I don't know at that time. Actually, let me ask you this. When you were going through the coaching ladder, was your goal to be a big league manager, or were you not clear yet on necessarily what you ultimately wanted to do within the coaching circles?
No, I honestly, I never had a goal to get to the big leagues. It was just, I just really enjoyed, coaching. I enjoyed players. I enjoyed, the people, and I was, blessed to, have a job in baseball. And so, I was lucky enough, John Daniels and the team over there, they kept, challenging me with, different jobs, and I enjoyed and loved, every minute of it. And so when I got to the big leagues in 2015, it was awesome. Obviously Jeff Bannister and, brought me on but, more importantly, I think some of the relationships you build, but, the guys were awesome. I mean, being around watching Adrian Beltre work and Prince Fielder and Chu and some of those guys, being able to take it in and then hopefully try to add some value to those guys and the team over there. So, the big league job, the job in 15, 16, I just absolutely loved.
All right, so then you go to the front office, and you get a little taste of that. What led to that move, and what did you learn from that experience?
I learned a lot of things. What led to it. I think I think that year in 16 at some point, Thad Levine had taken the general managing job with Minnesota, and after we lost to the Blue Jays that year in 16, I was maybe home, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, maybe it was a week, I don't know. And JD kind of reached out and asked if I had any interest in it. And so, we kind of, sat and thought about it, and, he wanted me to kind of oversee the minor leagues and help out with some other things. But I think, you learn a lot, just being able to, have a seat at the table and listen to what goes on. And I certainly spent a lot of time with the big leagues. I spent a lot of time with the minor leagues that year. And that's where I had some time to start diving into more like analytics. And I start diving into a little bit of some of the technology that's out there. And so, you look back like over those 2 years, I certainly enjoyed being on the field a lot more. And I knew that deep down in my heart. But there's a lot of things that I learned, through those 2 years that I appreciate and carry with me today.
How many suits did you have to purchase when you got that job?
I had a couple suits from being in the big leagues, and the flights and stuff. So I didn't purchase any.
Okay, good. One of the things that, I think stands out to you for me is your hunger to learn. And I just think, I think that's always important. I don't think there's really ever a time when that's not valuable. But with the rapid rate at which this game is evolving, it just seems like it's even more important now than ever. There are a lot of people, a lot of really smart, successful people who they have a stubbornness that maybe doesn't give them that same openness to learn when things change. Who influenced you, or how is it that you've been so willing and open to learn? And then the other side of that is, what is your process to learn? And how do you find that you are able to not just familiarize yourself, but really understand, new information, technology, stuff like that?
We had a saying over there, I think it came from JD, that I can't remember, it was in maybe 16 or something like that. And, the title of what he was talking about was Adapt or Die. And, he was right with all the technology, with the analytics, all this stuff was coming on and it came quick. And, I think, you have to see it if you have the eye, the eye for it. It's like all these sports are rapidly changing, and what players are doing now is different than what they were doing 10 and 20, 30 years ago. And you can turn on the MLB channel and watch an older game, and then compare it to today's game. And it's just, guys are bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, you look at the major league game now, and the velocity that these pitchers are throwing at is at an all-time high. I mean, we watch NFL games, and we're watching guys like Patrick Mahomes throw the ball 60, 70 yards across his body and doing things. And you watch golf, and the way that the distance these guys are hitting the ball. I think all these sports are evolving. And whether it's UFC, from where the fighters were 10 years ago to where they are today, just I think with all the technology, the training, the information, that guys continue to get better and better. And so, certainly in baseball, I've seen the game change. Like I mentioned earlier, these pitchers are throwing at an all-time, power premium. And then, the size of these position players and the number of home runs they're hitting and the speed that they can run and the way they defend, I think the game's evolving.
All right, so you go back to the dugout, and then after the I got to get my dates right, after the 2018 season? What year is this? This is 2020, right?
2020.
Yeah, so is it after the 2018 season you are mentioned as a candidate for, various managerial openings, and I guess is it fair to say that was the first off-season in which you kind of pursued those openings?
I didn't really pursue them, but it was definitely the first time that I'd been interviewed.
Okay, yes.
In that setting. So, yeah.
Sure, yeah. Let me, I guess, reframe. Not that you were actively looking to leave, but it was the first time that maybe your candidacy was taken to the next level. What did you learn? You didn't come away with a job that off season, but what did you learn about going through that process?
Well, you reflect on, and I was fortunate enough to interview with Texas. So, I knew the system, I knew the people, and I knew the players very well. So that was a very easy discussion as far as it was like on the preparation and just to go in and be yourself. But I think it helps, for later down the line when you go to another interview and another interview. I just felt maybe more and more comfortable after doing it.
Well, how would you describe? You already touched on John Daniels. I believe he's one of your, I guess, influences in some way. Who are the people in this more recent part of your career who you've learned from and who have been influential in your development and ability to do this and do that and stuff like that?
I mean, honestly, there's such a long handful. I'd go through, a long list, but certainly, John Daniels, and AJ Preller, Jose Vasquez, and Luis Ortiz, and I'm leaving guys off. But just like over the years of watching guys work and asking questions and these coaches and people that are truly experts in their area and be able to pick their brain and to be able to watch them make adjustments with players and add value to players. I just think the overall, body of the good people that I've been around, I've been able to steal some of that, over the years. And that's been a real blessing.
All right. So this most recent offseason, you get hired by the Padres, and in order to go through that process, you have to interview with one of your closest friends, AJ Preller. I think a lot of people maybe see that as a positive. Well, I got a great shot. I know the guy, but I think sometimes that's also a challenge because, you got to be able to separate that stuff. What was the process like for you, not just interviewing with the Padres, but interviewing with the Padres, knowing that you had a good friend on the other side of that wall who, had your back, but also had to make, the right decision for his job and his organization?
It was such I don't want to say a weird time, but it was a challenging time because I was in Santo Domingo managing Escogido at the time of everything. So, flying from, Escogido, Santo Domingo to San Diego and doing the interview and, meeting with a long day of interviews. And, honestly, like AJ and I hadn't really stayed in touch, over the last 4 or 5 years. He was on doing the Padre deal. I was invested in the Rangers. We may have a casual conversation here or there, but it was nothing like, when we had worked, 6, 7, 8 years, prior. So I didn't really know how it was going to go. And to go through the interview process, I probably met with 20 people in the organization. I think the meeting maybe started at 9 a.m., and, you would go an hour and a half or 2-hour windows with different groups. And so I probably met with 20 people. I didn't see AJ until, later that night for dinner, probably around like 8 o'clock at night. And so you don't know how it's going to go. You hadn't really seen him in a long time. You hadn't really connected in a long time. What was good is like getting through that day and then, sitting down, grabbing dinner, and he's asking questions. And, I knew a couple minutes into it, I was like, okay, like, the chemistry for me and him it's the same as it was 7-8 years ago. And I certainly didn't view myself as the favorite. In fact, I would probably view myself like as the long shot, going into that. And I'm just thankful at the end of the day, that I was fortunate enough to be, chosen to manage the team.
All right. What was that moment like when you found out? How did you find out? And what do you remember about that special moment?
Wow. I remember managing in Escogido, and literally, you're on an island, and I hadn't had any information. And of course, my parents, my wife, they're calling. Have you heard anything? We knew we were, one of the finalists. I didn't know if it was one of 4 finalists. I didn't know if it was 1 of 2. And so literally you're not hearing anything. I was so fortunate enough to be, fully kind of entrenched with the Escogido team, that really probably helped take my mind off a lot of things. How I got the word, we were playing a game, and it was one of those games. It was about the 4th inning, and just one of those games where nothing was going our way. We hit the ball hard a couple times, lined out. The other team had a lead on us. They'd had a couple bloopers fall in. And I don't know why. I was in the dugout in between innings, and I walked up to the clubhouse. I think I went to get a coffee. I really don't know. And just maybe yell, cuss, get some frustration out, not in front of the players. And all of a sudden I see this guy named Riley Westman, who works for the Padres, used to work for the Rangers. And he's a family friend of ours. And he's holding the phone in his hand in the clubhouse, and he's like shaking. And my immediate reaction, like, I thought something, like maybe there'd been a car wreck, something bad had gone home. And he just stuck the phone in my ear, and it was AJ on the other line. He said, hey, I normally wouldn't bother you in the middle of a game, but I need to know if you'll accept the job to be the San Diego Padres manager. And I don't really know what happened from there. I think I fell to my knees, maybe blacked out, maybe had a minute or two. I was probably crying. And then I went back out and managed the rest of the game. And then after the game, obviously, we had to keep it, kind of on the because the media didn't know yet. So, I told just my parents and my wife, and that was it. And the next day I was on a flight going to San Diego.
Now, I know AJ's not the most, I don't know if emotional is the right word, certainly not sentimental, I don't think. So was that like when he said, will you accept the job, was it just like totally deadpan, or was there like some life in there? How did he actually present that offer? Because I imagine his shirt was definitely untucked. His hair may or may not have been done, probably going on like 1 hour's sleep.
Honestly, like when I heard those words, I kind of blacked out, and I don't really know like what happened after that. Honestly, I remember falling to my knees, and Riley giving me like a huge hug, and it was a really quick moment because we had a game going on. That was it. It was it happened so quick, and it was shocking, but it was definitely a special moment. I remember as well, calling my wife afterwards, and my parents, and waking my parents up. That was a very special time.
You mentioned earlier a few minutes ago that you had your parents and family were like bugging you, do you have the job? You forgot there was also a pre and post game show host who was probably blowing you up, just wondering whether or not you had gotten the job, super excited for the possibility. So hopefully that you can build that pre and post game show host for whatever data plan he used up, just trying to figure out whether his buddy had gotten the job. So You can send an invoice.
It was crazy, the people that would reach out and literally, like, as you go through the process, you don't know anything, and so it was disappointing to let, you and other people, like, I literally don't know anything. So
I just like the fact that you're in the running. I thought that was really cool. All right, so now you've got a team. You've got, you've already had this moment, and maybe there'll be another one with, what's gone on. But you had your first spring training where you're addressing the club, and you kind of lay the foundation for what's important to you. So, what are the core principles, the non-negotiables for Jayce Tingler, the manager?
Really what we addressed, and we spent a lot of time in the off season. Obviously, I was new, so flying around and meeting the guys in the off season in November, December, January. I didn't want, the first time them to meet me face to face. For the most part, I didn't want that to be in spring training. So, we had already, had some meetings. We'd had some dinners. I'd worked out with some of the guys or watched them work out. So, at least like on my end, I thought it was pretty smooth. As far as, our non-negotiables, it was, to be yourself. I think that's critical. And we want to be an active group. And what does that mean? That means, doing the best we can to stay healthy and stay in shape. I want to be an active group. Expect the guys to be in the weight room each and every day, lifting, running, taking care of their bodies. We talked about the importance of, it's a long season, the importance of how we eat, how we hydrate, and how we stretch, and all those details that add up over time. So I think, like, the end of the day, we're looking for, we want guys to be competitive, ultra competitive. We're looking for guys to be tough. We're going to get beat up in this game a lot, and the more physical we are, the harder we push ourselves physically and mentally. I think, like, that builds character and builds toughness, for later down the road. So those are some of the things that we emphasize. Obviously, the importance of, throwing the ball over the plate, attacking the zone, managing the zone, from the hitter's point of view, being able to get on base, certainly value that, and the importance of playing good defense. How good can we play an advanced game of catch? Can we catch the ball and throw the ball to the right bases? In general, those are the things that we kind of discussed.
All right, finally, Jayce, I know you're a huge Chiefs fan. You got to celebrate a Super Bowl this past football season. Have you, in any way, shape, or form, tried to lure Pat Mahomes off the gridiron to the San Diego Padres organization?
I think it's important for Patrick to continue to work on his game. So I have not bothered him. I want to make sure him, Tyreek Hill, Kelsey, Sammy Watkins, the crew's good to go. So I have not messed with Patrick at all.